Welcome, everybody, to the in-depth study with Ralphie. But as you can see, Ralphie's not here today. And so I'm going to be filling in for him. And but before we get started, I want to say Shabbat Shalom to all of you who made it out, and Shabbat Shalom to everyone online who decided to tune in. So why don't we open with the word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Yahweh, blessed are you, King of the universe, the sovereign who breathed life into mankind so that we may have life. You also gave us your word. Your word is spirit-breathed so that we can actually draw close to you, draw near to you, and actually walk in the image that you designed us for. Father, I pray that you help us today to really focus in on your word, focus in on your Torah, your instructions, and what it means to love you and love our neighbor as ourselves, and to be in a covenant with you. I pray that you help me to mine out the things that are laid in front of me and to speak only what you desire for me to speak, and that you bless this family here and everywhere who are seeking you with an earnest heart. And Abba, we ask these things in your Son, Yehushua's mighty name. Amen. All right. So for the past couple of weeks, Ralphie has been talking out of the book of Acts, and he has been discussing circumcision. So I'm going to take you on a journey. It's going to be a similar journey. We're going to talk about circumcision, but we're not going to the book of Acts. I'd like to take you someplace else. Imagine, if you will, that you're going on a journey, and let's just say that I'm driving the bus, and the bus has no restroom. Okay? It's just a bus. So you guys, you're going to be on this journey with me, and it's going to be about 5 hours of driving. What's the first thing that you do before you leave the house to go on this bus ride with me? Let's see, Dane, there's a mic near you, and Michael, there's a mic right there between my bags. So if you don't mind subbing, holding the mics for... So before you go on this journey, before you leave the house, what do you do? We had a hand up here.
You use the bathroom?
You use the bathroom. Now, it's going to be about a 4 or 5 hour journey. Do you think we'll have to make a stop along the way? And what will that stop be for? Restroom. Again. Now, it seems really basic and fundamental that we're talking about stopping to use the restroom. But before we're done today, hopefully I can bring some matters into focus on how I see some of these passages and how they tie into commandments that we were given. Is that all right with you guys? Okay, good deal. Oh, wow, we got some heavyweights walking in the door. And welcome the people from down south. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat. You didn't know you were going to get this kind of welcome, did you? Well, yeah, it was all planned. Tone it down. All right. So what I'd like to do is let's go to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 10. By the way, I'm not putting any slides or anything up on the screen. So have your Bibles, your cell phone, or whatever you'd like to have so that you can lock in and follow along. Any slides or anything. So Deuteronomy chapter 10. And in Deuteronomy chapter 10, Moshe is recounting several of the things that have already taken place. But I want to begin in verse 12. And if anybody has Deuteronomy 10:12 and would like to read? It could be anybody. Okay.
Deuteronomy 10:12. And now, Israel, what does Lord your God require of you, but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul, and to keep the commandments and statutes of the Lord, which I am commanding you today for your good. Behold, to the Lord your God belong heaven and the heavens, the heaven of heavens, the earth with all that is in it. Yet the Lord set his heart in love on your fathers and chose their offspring after them, you above all peoples, as you are this day. Circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no longer stubborn. For the
Okay.
Lord your God.
Let's go ahead and stop there. I should have mentioned it before. So verse 16. What does verse 16 say? Comment, raise your hand. Anyone? Got a hand up over here.
Circumcise and remove sin from your heart. I'm reading from the Amplified Version. Circumcise, that is, remove sin from your heart, and be stiff-necked, stubborn, and be stiff-necked, which means stubborn, abstinent, no longer. For the no
All right.
longer.
So he's talking about circumcising the heart. And in Acts, where Ralphie was reading from and going to, they were talking about circumcision, and they were talking about circumcision of the flesh. So we're in Deuteronomy, and it's talking about circumcision of the heart. How do we circumcise our hearts, guys? I mean, do we actually get a knife and go in there and start cutting away? We have a hand right behind you there, Dane.
Keeping in prayer with the Father or Messiah, whichever you prefer.
Okay. We got a comment that says keeping in prayer. We got a comment right over here. Bradley?
I believe our actions, as God's words, our actions that we carry out in keeping his statutes, ordinance, and commandments is the circumcision of our heart.
Okay. Let's go back in this chapter again, because he pretty much tells us where we begin in verse 12. And I'll read it from my translation here, which is TS 2009. And now, ye Israel, what is Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, your Elohim, asking of you, but to fear Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh? Beginning of wisdom is to fear Yahweh. To walk in all his ways. And to love him and to serve Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your being. Interesting. Then in verse 13 it says to guard the commands. Sometimes I will say Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, sometimes I will say Yahweh. I hope that doesn't throw you guys off. And to guard the commands of Yahweh and his laws, or we could say his instructions, which I command you today for your good. Then it says, see, the heavens and the earth belong to Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, your Elohim, also the earth with all that is in it. And it goes on. And it says, and Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh delighted only in your fathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them, you above all peoples, as it is today. This is Moshe recounting. And it says, and you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart, and harden your neck no more. So apparently, they had hardened their necks before. What does a hardened or stiff neck look like? Any thoughts, any ideas? Feel free to comment, raise your hand. And okay, we got a comment over here.
The church today.
Well, I mean, in us, what does it look like? Because it's not specifically just the church.
Oh,
Pull the mic up close, please.
what is step? Not reading your scriptures, not doing the things that God's asking you to do.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? We got one over here.
It's walking in disobedience, and it's easy to see.
Okay. And Miss Pat has a comment.
Well, the stiff neck that I have this morning means I'm not able to move or unwilling to move without pain,
Yeah.
which I think implies to our spiritually we're not willing to be teachable.
Okay. We have a comment right here. Dan.
I wonder if it relates to working with animals, trying to get them to go the way that you want them to go. And when they refuse to go, it's because they stiffen their neck and won't let you turn them. And
Okay.
this is like Yahweh with his people. They're stiff-necked. They will not let me turn them the way I want them to go.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about stiff neck? We have a comment right over here.
Think of it as like a toddler, right? You're trying to tell them what to do, and they keep whining, and they won't listen to you, and they won't stop whining until you let them do what they want to do.
Thank you. So we've got several different examples that actually relate to what the nation did when they came out of Egypt. The Father called them stiff-necked. And he actually asked that they would love him and that they would obey him. And pretty much it's kind of like, if you guard these commands that I command you for your good. I like the example that you gave of a toddler, because a toddler doesn't know what is good for them. And very much like that, we often don't know what is good for us. Now, we might think we do because we live in an age of enlightenment, right? Where we're educated, we have science, we have all the institutions or the pillars of society that pretty much tell us how smart we really are. And if we're not smart enough, we can go to an expert who practices in a certain field. Note the word practice. Go right ahead, please.
I'd like to touch base a little bit on observance, what it means to observe, because I know when I read that, there was a little confusion in my mind of what observance really means.
So that word in verse 13, some translations say observe, some translations say guard, is in Hebrew shamar. Shamar. And it's very similar to the word shema, isn't it? You have the shem, you have the mem, and then you have the resh. I got a couple of Hebrew scholars in here. I'm looking over at Mike. Feel free to jump in there with any definitions that you want. So, guarding these means life. Okay. But what does that have to do with Acts, Paul? What does that have to do with what we read before when Ralphie was talking about Acts? All right, let's go. I'm going to skip around. You guys, I hope you can follow me. Let's go to Deuteronomy 30. And let's take a look at, sometimes all of this is really good. Chapter 30, yes, please. And I'll read a couple of verses, and then when I stop, is there anybody that I would also like to read? Okay, then I'll keep reading. Well, I'm going to read a few. I'm going to start it off, and then I'll read to I'm going to read till 6. Or or would you like to read verse 1 through 6? Yes. Okay, thank you.
When all these blessings and curses I have set before you come on you, and take them to heart, wherever the Lord your God disperses you among the nations. And when you and your children return to the Lord your God and obey him with all your heart and with all your soul, according to everything I commanded you today, then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where he scattered you. Even if you have been banished to the most distant land under the heavens, from there the Lord your God will gather you and bring you back. He will bring you to the land that belonged to your ancestors, and you will take possession of it. He will make you more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. The Lord your God will circumcise your hearts and the hearts of your descendants, so that you may love him with all your heart, with all your soul, and live.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, we're talking about circumcision of the heart. So what's connected with the circumcision of the heart in this chapter of Deuteronomy? Got a hand up right over here. Hold on, wait for the mic, please.
I have it right here. It means your desire to sin no longer. Like he will remove the desire to sin from your heart.
Okay.
That's what I have here on the Amplified Version.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other comments? Notice the word return. Return. What does that mean in Hebrew? What's the word? I mean, come on, you guys back there having conversation.
I don't know the word in Hebrew, but return to me means repent.
Yes, thank you. Any other thoughts? So he's asking his people, he's telling them that when they are scattered, when they are among the nations, he wants them to return. But this time it's different, at least in the language. It says that Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, your Elohim, shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed to love Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, your Elohim, with all your heart. It's saying that he will do the act of circumcising your heart. We got a comment on the far corner. Polly, please.
How can you return to somewhere you've never been?
Good question. How do you return to someplace you've never been? Or something? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Unless maybe at one point you had been there.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, we have Joe right here.
Yeah, in verse 16, it reads, and you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart. Then over here in 30, it's not us that does that, it's the Almighty.
Yes, thank you. Any other comments? We got one more comment back here.
I'm sorry, I had to say they're returning literally their descendants. It says descendants, meaning their forefathers, their bloodline. They're returning the ancient Israelites. The original ancient Israelites are returning back to their land from captivity, this captivity of Babylon. they're returning back to their homeland, Jerusalem, Israel.
Okay. Well, one of the things, okay, Michael has a comment.
Shuv is the root word that Shabbat and Teshuvah comes from. So basically, if you return to Yahuwah
Mike, closer to you.
and know His ways, you will have rest inside your whole nefesh. That's my understanding of the whole etymology and the word.
Yes, thank you. To return to Him because it's His word, His breath, His commands. And then Polly asked the question, how do you return to some place that you have never been? It's an interesting question. I can give you it's not even 2 cents. I'll give you my half-pence worth of thought on that. Since we were created in the image of Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, mankind. Now, this is going to go way out there. Test it out. On the 6th day, the beasts were created, and man was created. Man was created in the image of Elohim. Man fell, so all descendants were in the image of Adam. He gives his Torah, spirit breathed, that is the very breath of Him. If you take in the Torah, He's breathing in you with His very words and His very image. So now, the breath that you had that came from Adam is infused by the Ruach that comes directly from Him. So, one, yes, you are now walking in the image of Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh. Is that important? Or can we just be whatever we want? Because His instructions that was given, that was spirit breathed, has been done away with. And then the Mashiach that people say, Jesus or Yeshua, who is the word of Elohim, His word has been done away with. So Yeshua is no more because it doesn't really matter what we do. Let's kind of go into the circumcision a little bit more and why and who was the first one that we have on record for being circumcised. Keep all these in mind. Everything that we talked about, the trip, on the bus, and I'll try to be a good driver for you guys so you don't panic. We read Deuteronomy 10, we read chapter 30, and yeah, I'm kind of jumping all over the place. And let's get into this portion in Genesis, because Genesis has a chiastic structure that is pretty cool, I think. Genesis chapter 17. Genesis 17. And this has to do with Abram. Notice the name is not Abraham yet. It's Abram. In verse 1, it says, and when it came to be, and it came to be when Abram was 99 years old, that Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be perfect. Some translations say blameless. Well, there's no perfect people. How can you be blameless? Well, the word tells him to do this. So if we don't understand something when we read it, the practice is not to dismiss it, but to mine it out and dig in deeper, because we are unlearning so much of what we've been taught. Verse 2, and I will give my covenant between me and you, and shall greatly increase you. The word here for covenant is berit. It's an alliance, a pledge. And in a sense, berit is a cutting. You've heard the term cutting the covenant. And Abram fell on his face, and Elohim spoke with him, saying, As for me, look, my covenant is with you and shall be with you, and you shall become the father of many nations. And no longer is your name called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, because I shall make you the father of many nations. Quick question. Was Abraham circumcised at this point? The consensus is no, he wasn't circumcised. So the God of creation was making a covenant with an uncircumcised man. Whoa. Now, he's the same. He doesn't take anything back. So let's continue on in verse 6. And I shall make you exceedingly fruitful and make nations of you, and sovereigns shall come from you. And I shall establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you in the generations for an everlasting covenant to be Elohim, for an everlasting covenant to be Elohim, to be you and, wow, I'm reading this way wrong. Basically between Elohim and you and your seed after you. Do I see a hand? No, okay. And I shall give you and your seed after you the land of your sojournings, and all the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession, and I shall be their Elohim. And Elohim said to, now it changes the language, Abraham, as for you, guard my covenant, you and your seed after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you guard between me and you and your seed after you. Every male child among you is to be circumcised. And you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall become a sign of the covenant between me and you. A son of 8 days is circumcised by you. Every male child in your generations who is born in your house are bought with silver from any foreigner who's not of your seed. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I was looking in my concordance of my scriptures, and I look at it as a covenant it's a contract. In order to have a contract, there's two parties represented. One is the Almighty, the other one is Abraham. It was the Almighty that spelled out the terms of the contract. And Abraham would have to agree for this to be effective, to accept it. But that's what I think, because in any contract, there's two parties that is there.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to keep reading, and if you have any questions, hold on, or comments, because I'm going to be asking some questions here. So, Abraham, now we hear this term of circumcision, and it was a sign of the covenant, kind of like our tzitzit, right? Sign of the covenant. But this is a covenant in the flesh. Verse 14 says, and an uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, his life shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Okay. Now we start talking about in Genesis 17, Isaac's birth promise. But let's skip down because I want to get to some of the chiastic parts. Well, actually, we're almost there. And Elohim said to Abraham, as for Sarah, your wife, do not call her Sarai, for Sarah is her name. Wait, didn't he just rename Abram? So here's what the chiastic structure is. I think I have a little bit of time. Yeah. Abram fell on his face. Toward the end, in verse, let's see. Let me jump there. Verse 17, Abram fell on his face again. In verse 3, yeah, he fell on his face. He's given a covenant in verse 4, where he's told he's going to be the father of many nations. In verse 16, I know I'm jumping around. Verse 16, part of this chiasm is where Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh says, I will bless her, referring to Sarah, and she will become, and I will bless her, and she shall become nations, and sovereigns of people are to be from her. So you're starting to see where it's coming together. Both ends, Abram falls on his face. The next one is he gets the name changed, Sarah gets the name changed. And then he's going to be the father of many nations. She's going to be the mother of the nations. And all of this is tied into a covenant of circumcision. And the covenant of circumcision had not happened, the circumcision, before he was circumcised. So when in Acts, when they're saying, you know, these people must be circumcised, the reality is, not yet. If Abram could become Abraham and receive a blessing before circumcision, what's the first thing that he asks us to circumcise before we circumcise the flesh? Deb, did I see your hand? No? All right. Your lips were moving, I'm sorry. Dan? Okay, well, go right ahead.
Heart.
Heart. Okay. Any other comments? And Dan?
In verse 1, which you brought out already, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless, comes before the covenant and comes before circumcision.
Yes.
And this is kind of what I think Paul is alluding to in Galatians and in different places, that circumcision means nothing if you don't walk in his ways and obey him. It's just something you do in your flesh, but
yes.
God is always looking for a heart.
Always, always about the heart. So the promises of the covenant, and I'm going to skip around. One, I'll just read the order. Abram fell on his face. Abram fell on his face. Abram would be a father. Sarah would be a mother. Abram's name is changed to Abraham or Abraham. Sarah's name is changed to Sarah. Multiply greatly, and then also nullify. There's an everlasting covenant. There's a physical everlasting covenant because of circumcision. And then it ties into the land, and then it also ties into circumcision. And you shall keep the covenant which is in the center. You shall keep the covenant. Things that I tell you today should be upon your heart. Okay, now we're going to tie in the bus ride. Let's go to Deuteronomy 6. You have a question? Turn the mic on.
On the first chapter of the last one we read, Abraham first had to believe.
Yes.
He had to believe that he was blameless.
Closer.
That he could be blameless, that he was blameless because God said he was blameless. So the first thing he actually had to do was believe.
Yes. It's interesting when you look into the Hebrew of what being perfect means. It means to be wholly equipped for whatever that task is. And I've used the analogy before, and I've heard it used by other people that let's just say that there's a cabinet from IKEA here, and it comes with everything I need to build the cabinet. And then somebody says, hey, I need to assemble this chair. Can you bring your tools over here and put together this chair? Might not be equipped to put together that chair, but it's perfect for the cabinet. So perfect does not mean how I learned in the Greco mindset world that, oh, you can do anything and everything is going to be perfect. No, you're equipped to do whatever the task was. So it's the same way when Job was blameless. He was blameless in the sense that he could withstand the assault that was going to come on him, to the point where Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh trusted and said, have you set your eyes on my servant? So he's saying that be blameless, because the things that I am commanding you today are not too far off from you, nor does anybody have to ascend to heaven and bring them back, because they're here easily within your reach. So let's go ahead, and I think, Dan, were you reading? Did you raise your hand for that or no? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, Deuteronomy 6:1. I didn't mean to pick on you, brother.
It's all right.
But very rarely do I get a chance
used
to pick on you. All right, and through verse 6. 1 through 6.
Okay. Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the ordinances that the Yahweh your Elohim charged me to teach you to observe in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy, so that you and your children and your children's children may fear Yahweh your God all the days of your life and keep all his decrees and his commandments that I am commanding you, so that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, observe them diligently, so that it may go well with you, so that you may multiply greatly in the land flowing with milk and honey, as Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim is Yahweh alone. You shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding you today in your heart.
So again, these are words that's supposed to be on their heart, and it's also tied with the covenant, and it's tied with land. So let's keep going here, because there's an interesting part that comes in as far as the descendants. And it says, and you shall impress them upon your children. You shall speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And it shall be, when Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, your Elohim, brings you into the land, again, back to the land, which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzhak, to Yaakov, to give you great and good cities which you did not build. And all these things, because I'm going to skip through that again, it says that you be on guard lest you forget Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, who brought you out of the land of Mizraim from the house of bondage. All right. You guys ready for the bus ride? When are these things supposed to be taught to your descendants? When? Yes, but he's being very specific. Concrete language, yes, always. But in terms of a nomadic people and people when they're doing things, okay? Okay, I'm going to throw the answer under the bus. When you sit in the house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up, the fathers would circumcise the sons on the 8th day. The child is too young to know the symbology and what the covenant means. The father is being obedient, and he's doing one of the first steps of passing the covenant along. Before that child can actually be obedient, he's being circumcised. So, from a first century Jewish mind, circumcision was done first, then the heart came later. From what we see in the Torah, the heart came first, and then circumcision came later, especially with Abram. So it could go either way, but the main point was as a covenant, and it's been emphasized that it should be written on your heart. Now, the covenant of flesh, think about that. What is being cut off is cast away. Yeshua said, if you want to follow me, disown yourself. Love me, obey me. We die to self, or we cut off the flesh. It's done one time. We don't recut it off every day. If we cut it off, it's done. You've been circumcised, you've been circumcised. Circumcision of the heart's a little bit different because he told them to turn back, to return, and not let their heart grow hard, stiff, or whatever you want to call it. So I'm reading this and I'm studying earlier this week when Ralphie called and said, hey, brother, I was wondering if you could handle that part for me. And it's like, I don't know what to talk about. Okay, I'll talk about circumcision, but I won't talk about it from the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament. And I thought about what a circumcised male would notice when he got up. Before he goes on a journey, he goes and uses the bathroom to relieve himself. He will see the sign of the covenant. As he's on that journey, if he has to stop and use the restroom again, he will see the sign of the covenant. If he gets together with his wife, he will recognize the sign of the covenant. If he lays with a strange woman, the sign of the covenant will be in front of him. Yes, Mark, please.
So just going to mention there's two places sign of the covenant comes in the whole of Torah, and it's obviously the rainbow and the circumcision of the flesh.
Yes.
So the rainbow is something that everybody can see because it's to everybody, including the animals. It's a sign of the covenant to everybody because everyone sees it. Who sees the circumcision of the flesh? It's only the individual.
Yes. Only the individual, and if maybe his spouse. But also, who sees the circumcision of the heart? Hold on. Wait. Too valuable to let it go.
The circumcision of the heart obviously is noticed and evident to the Father, but it should be noticed among men
It
in the
should be
deeds
noticed.
in the deeds that the man does
Thank
or
you.
woman.
So, on this journey as we walk through life, whether you call it a bus ride, whether you call it a long trip or whatever, the circumcision of the heart, for most of us, is something that wherever we are, we start making that circumcision. And it says, first we do it. And then I believe that the Ruach, because his word is spirit breathed, comes in, and that's when it says, he will make the circumcision of heart. He will do it. So we start, but he's also our Father. And the fathers would do it. The fathers would do that with the child and circumcise the child because the father had the responsibility of speaking these things to their children while they were on their way, when they lay down, when they're sitting, when they come in, when they go out. It was something that would always be there. It was an everlasting covenant. It was never done away with. So the circumcision of the heart, circumcision of the flesh were symbolic of one another. You can't really take one out of the room without the other one, and you can't get rid of the Torah and say you are pretty much in a covenant, because there was a responsibility for Abram or any of us to withhold that part of the covenant. Well, I think I'm out of time right now. We got one more comment. Go ahead, Michael.
It says, "Behold, I make a new covenant with you, not one that I made with your forefathers. This will be one not of stone, but of flesh." That's what this is reminding me of. You know, it's just a beautiful thing that we have to have that faith first. We have to believe in the Father, and we have to walk out those actions. James 1:5, faith without works is dead. Yeah. So we have to have that, Aki. I love this. Thank you.
So we also know, thank you for that comment. We also know that Abram left his land not knowing where he was going, but he trusted in Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh to lead him. And he was looking, he was obedient, he was faithful. Sometimes we don't know. I mean, let me just put it this way, speaking for myself, I never know. I mean, sure, my house was there when I left, but I don't know if it will be there when I get back. My job was there when I left last week, but I don't know if it will be there Tuesday. My life is here right now, but I don't know if it will be here next Shabbat. What I do know with certainty is that the same Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh that created everything that breathes and all mankind has bent the knee to give us a choice of good and bad, life and death. And it simply means that we obey his instructions. And his instructions have not been made complicated for us, because it is his Ruach, his spirit, that helps us to be able to do them. On that note, I better close. Heavenly Father, Yahweh, oh, Abba, what can we say? We're dirt. You breathe life into dirt. Afar molded us, shaped us into what you wanted us to be. I pray, Father, that each one of us will allow ourselves to be molded and shaped into the image that you have created for us, and that we will allow your Ruach spirit to be upon us by reading and mining out your word. Your word is spirit breathed. And if we eat from your word, we're eating of what you have given us. We also, Father, recognize that Yeshua HaMashiach is the living word, and that he came and gave his life so that we can approach you even bolder than what we could before, by removing the death penalty from us. Father, I pray that your spirit will blow in this room today, that you will breathe upon each one of us, and that we will take to heart the matters that you have placed upon our heart. Thank you for this opportunity, and I thank you in Yeshua HaMashiach's mighty name. Amen. All right, folks, we'll be back at 3. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for showing up today.